All right, I'd like to call to order the Orono Independent School District's April 12th meeting, April 10th, excuse me, at 7 p.m. The first item on our agenda is our Pledge of Allegiance, and so I'd like to ask Ms. Howe if she would lead us in the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, welcome. We are glad to see people in the audience tonight. That's great. Thank you for being here. We have a lot of things to approve tonight on our agenda, and so we'll get started now. So the first thing we knew to do is consider our agenda. Is there any board member that wants to make any changes to the proposed agenda? All right, so do I have a motion that we approve the printed agenda?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. All right, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda, which contains routine matters that typically do not require board discussion. Individual board members may remove an item from the consent agenda for discussion or separate action. And on our consent agenda tonight is approving the minutes from our regular meeting held on March 13th, 2023, approve personnel recommendations, accept donations totaling $12,892.95, approve the treasurer's report for February 2023, approve electronic fund transfers, approve food service personnel master contract for 2022 to 2023, and approve bill vouchers, EP register, EFT vouchers, and our Capital One spending. Do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I would like to move and just comment that it was a pleasure to work with the food service people. I think on behalf of negotiations, that was a really nice session that we had with them. I was glad we got that done.
Good. So I've got a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other discussion on the consent agenda? Thanks for that update, Laura. All right, all in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Great. All right. The next item we have is one of the best parts of the meeting is our superintendent's report on excellence.
Well,
Dr.
thank you,
Fletcher.
Mr. Chair. Since we last met, we have closed our winter athletics season with a lot of great news. So I have some updates. First, boys basketball. Orono varsity boys basketball had defeated Benilde St. Margaret with a score of 66-62 the last time we had met to clinch the 3A Section 6 championship. And with the victory, we qualified for state-level competition for the first time since 2015, and we were seeded 2 in Class AAA. At the quarterfinal game, the boys defeated Hermantown 84-82, but were defeated by De La Salle in the semifinal. We're thrilled that the team won the third-place game against Alexandria area schools by a score of 67-63. I'm also proud to share that Isaiah Hagan and Kyle Kellenbach were both named to the all-tournament team. In addition, special thanks to Coach Barry Wohler, Coach Runka, and Coach Sembrowicz for leading the boys through a fantastic season. Also, in the area of athletics, Avery Anderson, many of you may know him, AAA State Award winner. Congratulations to Avery, who was selected as the MSHSL AAA winner for Region 2A. The award recognizes students who excel in athletics, arts, and activities. Avery is a 3-sport athlete and a team leader in soccer, hockey, and lacrosse. He's earned superior ratings in choir and band and was selected to sing the national anthem at the MSHSL State Girls Hockey Tournament. Excuse me. His academics have been strong, and his Spanish teacher says that he is an exceptional student, largely due to his positive attitude. To have an Orono High School student recognized at this level is a really proud moment for us all. Congratulations, Avery. Excuse me. So much to read here. Our speech team continues to shine this year. Speech team took 3rd place at the South St. Paul tournament and 1st place at the Melrose Speech Extravaganza over spring break. Based on their success this season, 5 students were recently named West Metro All-Conference Speakers for 2023. Emily Middleton in Creative Expression, Axel Duke in Drama, Madeline Dorr in Humor, Sophie Middleton in Prose, Maya Haugen in Storytelling, An honorable mention to Barrett Buck in prose and McKenna Monger in poetry. I'm so excited to also share that Orono's head speech coach, Barb Schaffner, was chosen as the National Speech and Debate Association Head Coach of the Year for Central Minnesota Districts. And congratulations, Barb. Minnesota Speech and Debate is one of the most competitive charters in the nation with a wealth of coaching experience in our district area, and it's truly a great honor that Coach Schaffner was chosen, and we're very, very fortunate to have her at the helm of Orono speech team. Congratulations, Barb. Orono math team completed their successful season with a strong second place finish at the Class AA state tournament held at South St. Paul High School. Seniors Zara Coakley, Sam Ertmer, Colin Parker, and Michael Rasher led the team, which has qualified for the state tournament for 3 consecutive seasons. Juniors Blake Barrington and Jack Eugster were also returned to state with the team, along with newcomers Kaya Erickson, Evelyn Miller, and Elise Meyer. Michael Rasher also qualified for the state individual meet for the 3rd consecutive season. Coach Pat Bacon said, "I am extremely proud of this year's team. The senior leadership made my job easy." We share Coach Bacon's pride in these results, and congratulations to Orono Schools math team. Quiz Bowl. Congratulations to the Orono High School Varsity Quiz Bowl team that placed 9th in the state and is now one of only 288 teams to compete at nationals in Georgia at the end of May. Varsity and team includes Madeline Dorr, Georgia Green, Charlie Johnson, Joey Mariani, and Hunter Wheaton. Best of luck at nationals to our Orono Quiz Bowl. And finally, theater productions. We have many theater productions right now. Rehearsals are underway, and FYI, tickets are now on sale. Please get them. For 2 Springs theater productions involving both middle school and high school students. The high school will be presenting Steel Magnolias, April 27th through to 29th. And our middle school students will present Disney's Descendants, the musical, with performances the first week of May. And we look forward to both of those productions. I'm sure they'll be top-notch. And that concludes my report. Mr. Bash.
Thank you very much, Dr. Flesher. As I said, that's some pretty impressive news for a relatively small school to be doing that well. That's very impressive. All right, the next item on our agenda tonight is board members' questions and comments and committee reports. So we'll start with the committee reports, and the first one is the Finance and Facility Committee meeting update. Who's going to go first?
Do you want to start?
I certainly can.
Okay.
I'll be brief on it. So we have been meeting regularly now with our facilities and finance to discuss the 2- and 10-year facility planning. If you remember, we had Wold out back last year. In December, they presented, and then we've been working on how are we going to move forward with some of those projects. We'll hear tonight from the business manager about, and do we have Ehlers here as well? Hey. To hear more detail about what the plan is for moving forward and financing some of these projects. But the gist of it is that there are always expensive projects to do with maintaining a school system, but they're not always linear. And right now what we're doing is trying to be strategic with our finances and minimize some of the lumpiness that can come from that. We're trying to capitalize on economies of scale and ensure that the important projects are getting done. And like I said, we'll hear more about that later this evening.
I am knocking off my bullet points that you've already covered. I also want to just mention that you're going to hear a lot about finance tonight in terms of investing in our facilities and our property. But you're going to be looking at 23, 24, and in the finance meeting this last time and in most other times, we're looking at beyond that because we want to minimize surprises for everybody. And so our meetings can last kind of a long time sometimes because we're talking about multi-year work. I also just want to say thank you again. We said it at the finance meeting. Thank you again for voters for approving the tech levy. It allows us to do so many things and we really appreciate it. And then the other thing, a lens that we've talked about in the past, but I like to bring it up because I think it's really important, and I think it's a healthy board perspective, is the lens that we always look through is that we try to not burden future boards unnecessarily. So we're very judicious in how we use debt and how we use other financing models or modes, because we're the board now, but we may not always be the board, and it's important to have all future boards be as healthy and high functioning as this one. Mike, did you have anything else?
Yeah, just one observation, again, really impressed with I think all of us with what we saw from the staff, the administration, on how to structure a very complex deal, again, that meets your requirement, that gets what needs to be done today done, doesn't burden future boards, and stays within the parameters we have today of voter-approved and state-authorized levy authority, so that we're able to do this without having to go to the voters and ask for more money. And I think that being fiscally responsible is very important.
I think it's important to clarify or expand on when we say burden the board in the future, it's really about going back to the community and asking a financial request from the community, or putting a burden on what the school has to give up in place of things, right? So the burden on the board is really a smaller version of saying everybody else around us, right? So
You will hear more later in the agenda, so. Ms. Borchers, how would you like to talk about the policy committee?
Yes, I will. It will be brief. We reviewed the 800 series, which is in your packet, so that too we will be talking about later tonight. Or actually just presenting and then waiting for your feedback. And I just have to compliment Mr. Bash, who comes to those meetings extremely prepared and well-read, and I appreciate it.
Well, you'll see it later, but we will be dealing with a kind of an antiquated policy tonight. It's based on state law that talks about, again, you can imagine decades ago when we might have had old computers that might have had some value, that the policy says that our technology, when we're done with it, we can give it to prisons and junior colleges. If you can imagine when we're done with technology today, nobody is going to want that. But we have to have a policy that, because that's what state law says, is that that's where we can donate our older technology to. So again, it's a few decades old, but it's what's in the state law, and that's what you'll see tonight. So that's what we have to deal with. All right, let's talk about now other board members' comments and questions. Wendy, let's start with you.
I have no update this month with this meeting.
Laura.
So I was at an Orono board meeting earlier, and a lot of what they are working on sounds like a lot of what you're working on with facilities and finance. They have a very large imminent need coming in the form of a replacement of their refrigeration system. It's environmentally not great. It's about 3 years past its date where they said that it would be. It's going to be about $550,000 to replace it, unfortunately. But they have very good reserves right now. They're looking into some very creative financing options, which will also, go for part or all, and they're doing some grant applications. So I think we should be able to do it, but they also have a roof that's very old and past its prime, which is another very large six-figure project. But the planning is there, the thoughtfulness is there, and it should be able to be done without burdening the school district for it. And we also, just prior to break, had a recap meeting from the Orono Action Committee to discuss what worked, what could we improve on for our capital visit, and to kind of get some focus. That group is growing and changing right now for the best. It's really quite exciting, but trying to make some goals, and among them, much like we're doing with the district, relationship building, getting to know our legislators, forming these bonds that we can come to them. And we're going to try to make a goal to interface with them at least twice a year. So we had the Capitol visit, but we're looking to have the legislators come to school possibly in some form, maybe November, December, and keep that connection going. So put that on your radar. It won't be until later in the year, but we'd like to make sure that we're interfacing at least twice a year, and it would be fun to get them to come here and see the creative things that we're doing for our students. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Sarah.
Thank you. I have two things. The first is the middle school principal search. I just want to give because you're not going to cover that tonight, correct? I just want to say, it was an amazing process, a process that you all should be very proud of and how Orono handles itself. We had amazing candidates, and an incredible group of people interviewing the candidates, including principals and teachers and staff from Orono Middle School. So it was a very invested group of people, and they, prior to coming to interview all these folks, there was a survey taken, and I'm not sure if it was Dr. Elger who gave it, or I'm sorry, I don't remember. It was, okay. Well, it was great because it identified the priorities of teachers and staff and parents. And out of 14 options that were listed in the survey, they had the same top 4. The parents and the staff had the same top 4. And that is, I think, I just wanted to share that because that's extraordinary. And I think that's very telling in how we are all aligned towards the same goals. And I'm going to redo the top 4, which is support teachers in their work with students, maintain a safe and orderly environment in school culture, provide a welcoming school climate for all students, and shape a vision of academic success for all students. So I just wanted to compliment the process and also obviously compliment Ms. Kim Van Isles on being the new middle school principal starting July 1. And the other thing I wanted to say and congratulate is Mr. Tim Arnold for leading an amazing band trip to France. Whew. I'm very impressed. And my kids are impressed, and everybody I've talked to had a great time. So many thanks to him. And that concludes my report.
Ally?
I'm just going to piggyback off the France comment because I was lucky enough to actually hear their concert in Paris, and it was amazing. So remarkable. These students worked so hard, and they were playing at a level that they should be extremely proud of. And I, for one, was beaming. I was so proud of our district sitting in that church in Paris. It was really, really neat. So I wanted to share that. And again, huge shout out to Mr. Arnold and to Reed Hartman because they were the 2 leaders, the long-term sub, and all the parent chaperones because it's a big job. It's a big job. But we even saw some of the students wandering around in Paris during the day, navigating in their free time. And it was just cool to see them experiencing the culture and just getting out there and doing something independently. It's just a cool experience. So super excited that our school supports those experiences. Other than that, Sarah and I attended Orono Healthy Youth on March 16th. And at this meeting, Donna Osvig, she's our integration and engagement coordinator at Orono Schools. She reported on some of the recent training she's received at the Search Institute or via the Search Institute. And this is an organization that partners with schools and organizations to promote positive youth development. So she attended 2 workshops. One was with engaging families to help overcome barriers for family engagement. And the other was intentional relationships, which works with youth to empower learning and development and creating those intentional relationships with our youth. So some really insightful information was shared and some great strategies and skills that will be implemented with our own families in our district that we're excited about. And then Tiffany Clifton just had a few updates. One is they're looking for Promise Fellows for this summer as well as for next year. These individuals work directly with the youth in grades 6 to 12 to provide support and guidance in school. And I guess it sounds like Tiffany was saying recruitment's been a little challenging. So if anyone's interested, contact Community Ed. Other than that, Wellness Expo will be Tuesday, May 9th, 5 to 7 at the Orono Activity Center. This will be done in connection with Empty Bowls, which this year will be Ice Cream Social, and Family Service Night as well. So we encourage people to attend. And then lastly, the last thing she mentioned, summer enrollment is really high, projected to keep getting higher, and they're always in need of staff for summer programs. So if anyone's interested, again, reach out for that. And that concludes my report.
Thank you. Todd?
Yeah, I just have one other, for the OFE, the Orono Foundation. They had a meeting right before spring break. They're doing very well, great things within the community, but the 2 comments, the gala is on the 22nd of this month, and individual tickets are now on sale. And then also just kind of a general reminder that if you have any interest in being a part of that board or being a volunteer, they're always looking for interested members of the community, so you can reach out to Amy Mitchell or Paul Springmeyer.
Thank you. I'm looking forward to an event named after me, so I think that's, I'll go and celebrate. All right, any other comments that anyone needs to follow up on? All right. Our next item is old business, and the first item there is our 2024 to 2025 academic calendar. Dr. Flesher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. In your packets is the 2024-25 school calendar for second reading. There were no other comments, additional comments from board members. And so this has been reviewed by our administrative team, meet and confer, groups of teachers, and then all teachers. And now school board have reviewed this proposed calendar, so we're requesting that the board take action to set the 2024-25 calendar as proposed.
So I need a motion to approve that 2024-2025 academic calendar.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
And we do want to confirm that Ms. Borchers has.
I looked it
in
over.
her
It looks good.
usual- For Wendy and Todd, she is our expert on finding those details. So if she says it's okay, we're good.
Well, now you've jinxed me, but we'll see.
No, that's important. All right. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Great, we have a calendar for 2024-2025. All right, the next item is policy review. Dr. Flesher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. There have been no additional revisions or comments from board members regarding these policies in the last week. So our policy committee believes that these are ready for action. And it would be the 8 policy in the 600 series. And I won't review these since we've reviewed them already, but we believe that these are ready for action.
All right, I need a motion then that we approve the revised policies that are on, printed on the page in front of you, that have already had their first reading.
I'll move to approve those policies in the 600 series.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Great. Any discussion or questions? All right, let's vote on that. Everyone in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Anyone opposed? Great, we have 8 revised policies. All right, is there any other old business that we need to deal with tonight? All right, on to new business. And the first item of new business, since we're having so much fun with policies, is more policies. Dr. Flesher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I invite Dr. Aaron Ruland, Executive Director of Learning and Accountability, to the board table for presentation and brief remarks regarding the 4 policies in the 800 series for your review. These include Policy 801, Equal Access to School Facilities, and this is a new policy. Policy 802, Disposition of Obsolete Equipment and Materials. That was what Mr. Bash was discussing. Policy 806, Crisis Management. This is a policy that we have reviewed recently. And then Policy 807, Health and Safety. Again, I just continue to thank the Board Policy Committee. We are nearly, this would complete the 800 series, and we will move on to 900. And we're holding 700 for probably summer potential work, and that's particularly related to finances, but we will have completed almost everything. So I turn it over to Dr. Ruland. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Flesher, Chair Bash, and members of the board. So as Dr. Flesher mentioned, there are 4 policies in your packet tonight. I'm going to actually start with Policy 806, which is Crisis Management. That was the policy we reviewed in November. It's one of the policies that's required to be reviewed annually, so we brought that before the board in November of this school year. And the Board Policy Committee has no recommended changes and would defer to that November review. So the safety of our children, staff, and community members is a top priority since revision. We've continued to do extensive planning and reviewed, and there's further implementation on that crisis plan. So we're confident in the leadership and the planning that's going into that, but the policy is good as is. So the 3 policies that are up for the first reading tonight that we'd bring back for a second reading start with Policy 801. As Dr. Flesher mentioned, this is a new policy to Orono. This policy has been an MSBA model policy for quite some time, and it's very congruent with our Policy 508, school-sponsored curriculum and non-curriculum related student groups and activities. So as we were reviewing that policy this fall, our school district attorney, Trevor Helmers, advised us that we should adopt Policy 801 in addition to that, and that ensures that we've articulated the broad parameters for student-initiated groups and meetings. It's both in our interest to support student-initiated groups as well as to establish parameters that ensure those groups follow procedures and guidance as far as behavior and supervisory expectations. So the recommended modifications from this policy are in your packet. They specifically note that this policy applies only to Orono High School. And it also eliminates procedural aspects that are delegated to management, to the principals. So policy 508, in contrast, delves a little bit more into the details, definitions, and expectations for both curriculum and non-curriculum related student groups. So those two policies work really hand in glove. The next policy that's up tonight is 802, the disposition of obsolete equipment and material. Chair Bash described this previously. Not surprisingly, our current policy was well aligned with the MSBA policy, which is essentially well aligned with the statute. It is the statute. The minor language changes that would be different in this recommendation amounts to the amounts in the contract. So the amounts in the contracts are slightly different in statute, as well as removing a detailed list of things that we didn't feel like was necessary to be included. So this policy really aligns with state statute, and the recommendations really reflect those changes in state statute. And then finally, policy 807, health and safety. Again, our current policy was well aligned with MSBA model policy, and it also reflects that commitment to health and safety as a top priority. The policy committee is recommending removal of a detailed list of areas that may be addressed by a health and safety committee as they fall under the responsibility of management. So we didn't feel like we needed to continue to list that possible list of activities in the policy. Administration is diligent about addressing all areas of health and safety, including a safety committee that works on these matters. We also routinely work with external consultants who support administration and committee members in remaining current with any new changes or existing safety and health requirements. So we really feel on top of that administratively. So the policies before you tonight complete the review of 800 series, as Dr. Flesher mentioned. As always, the policy committee welcomes any feedback from board members, and these 3 reviewed policies will be advanced for a second reading at the next meeting.
Thank you, Dr. Ruland. That's what I was just about to say. So if you've got any questions or comments, please ask Dr. Flesher or Sarah or myself. Otherwise, we will see them back in 2 weeks. Absolutely.
So, in reference to 801, because it's specific for the high school, do you mean like the high school clubs, groups? How, where would this be found then for, I know there are some middle school groups and clubs that I know like there are a couple that are now kind of coming back up through the school, but then there are some outside. Where would those policies?
So those clubs actually fall under the direction of community education or school staff. So that makes them different than a student-initiated group.
Great.
So this policy is specific to student-initiated groups and that determination of whether or not they're curriculum or non-curriculum related. So we still can offer clubs as part of a program supporting students, which just for the record, the middle school is working very hard along with community ed to expand opportunities for kids this spring and beyond.
Great, thank you for the clarification.
Yep.
There will be a host of new activities for the fall.
That was a good question. Anyone else have a question? Thank you, Dr. Ruland.
Yep, welcome.
We'll do this again in 2 weeks. All right, the next item is the beginning of a complex series of votes that we'll be taking. So we'll start, the item is our budget discussion for 2023 to 2024. And I'd like to, Dr. Flesher.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First, I welcome Mr. Jim Westrom to the board table for a series of presentations regarding school district finances and building maintenance needs. Mr. Westrom is going to present on 4 different finance-related topics. The topics include discussion of operating budget, facilities, and technology budgets, as well as proposed bond sale. The Facilities and Finance Committee and the entire board, as Mr. Madsen mentioned, through a December workshop, have been working on a long-range planning for facilities all year. And tonight we will take action on LTFM budget setting for these funds for the 2023 and 24 school year for both Orono schools and for our intermediate school district partner, ISD 287. That's our intermediate district. And that action is actually an annual responsibility. But in addition, tonight we also take action on the middle school HVAC replacement, as well as efficiently the entry redesign and then acceleration of technology hardware for classrooms through a bond sale Our Facilities and Finance Committee has worked hard to braid various funding streams to complete these needed projects for our students. Bond sales and our recent voter-approved technology levy, state-approved levy authority allow us to schedule our debt strategically to have minimal tax impact while we maintain the community investment in our school buildings. While our middle school seems like the new building, it was built in 1999 and is now approaching 25 years and in need of HVAC replacement. As we did in our other buildings in 2008, when we made those HVAC replacements, we can now make some important safety enhancements to our middle school entry sequence at the same time as HVAC for cost efficiencies. In addition, given our work with WOLD this year in long-term planning, I think you all talked a little bit about this tonight, we have an opportunity to schedule the debt while planning for other needs in the future. For instance, this debt will be paid or mostly paid by the time we need to do roofs. So that's what we started out as a goal a year and a half ago, is to know that as we are replacing things that we have a schedule for replacement and we have the funds to do that. So being really strategic about that so that our debt is that we can minimize the impact now and for any future for both the board and the community. Our financial partner, Ellers, and Mr. Jeff Seeley is here with us tonight as well for discussion on all of these complex funding topics. So I'm very grateful to Mr. Westrom and Mr. Seeley for their leadership in finance and facilities, and turn it over to Mr. Westrom for presentation.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Flesher and Mr. Chair, members of the board. We've been very busy, haven't we, as a board and as subcommittees of the board or committees of the board, especially the Finance and Facility Committee in recent months. So as Dr. Flesher indicated, we'll be talking about some of our long-range and capital budgets, but I did just want to touch base real quick. You're probably aware that the school district's fiscal year goes from July 1st through June 30th. And there's a legislative session in place right now. So currently, we do not know what our funding streams will be in the operations of the district. And so I did want to just indicate that we're not ignoring those, but we're hopeful that the legislature gets their work wrapped up in a timely fashion so that we can continue our important planning. As any conversation regarding resource allocation begins, I think it's really important to know that the work or the mission and the values of the district guide the work of the district. And so as we're looking at the operations that will begin next July and go through June 30th of 2024, these are the guiding principles that guide our work. So when we're looking at a budget, I just want to mention that there are different funds within our budget, and our district funds include the general fund, which basically is the operations of the school district. But we also have a food service fund, and you probably have heard that the legislature has made some approvals of financing and reimbursing school districts for meals for all students. So we're still taking a look at that and trying to determine how that's going to impact our food service fund. But you see our community service fund, and you probably have already heard through your updates that community service provides a lot of youth activities and is just bursting at the seams. So what a great, exciting time. And that budget will be brought to the board at sometime in June as well. But the capital fund and the building construction fund are two items that really are an ongoing practice or ongoing study. And I'll go through a little bit of that information. And due to the timelines of ordering and designing and actually implementing, and the fact that our buildings are very, very well used from September through June, and we only have a short window, June, July, and August, to do many of the major projects. So it's really important, even though it doesn't totally flow with our fiscal year of July through June, that we are always constantly looking at this, planning and positioning the district quite well. Then we have the debt service fund, the internal service fund, and the OPEB trust fund as well. So just a quick heads up that the 23-24 assumptions are very similar to what they've been in the past. Did want to mention that our estimated enrollment is around 2,900 students, and that includes a larger than usual kindergarten class, and it also includes a high level of participation with our 0 to 5-year-old population. So as you're aware, over the last couple of years, our enrollment has been stable, and we don't anticipate significant growth. So currently, we're anticipating a little over a dozen new students into the district. Now, those students haven't actually enrolled because we continue to see homes being purchased and people moving into the district. And then we do have a couple move-outs too. But we're continuing to watch that. And so what we're doing is we're using the classroom teacher staffing ratios that you see before you to ensure that we don't overstaff and that we actually have the students actually registered and coming in the fall before we add additional staffing. So that guides our work. And then also want to just talk about the state general funding. Much of our revenue comes in the form of a formula allowance. And at this point, there is no increase. We think it's highly likely that it'll be greater than a 0% increase. And we have heard reports that it could be as high as 4%. So we're continuing to basically align our enrollment with our classroom staffing. And at this point, we don't see any significant major changes in programming. However, the legislature could direct school boards and school districts to provide additional types of programming or additional, sometimes we call those unfunded mandates. So we'll continue to watch that, and I think the legislature is reconvening now, so we'll be continuing to watch that as things progress. And then the fund balance, the board has a policy, which you've been doing a lot of work on these days, is to have a minimum of at least a 5% fund balance policy. So we will continue that tradition, that long tradition of prudent fiscal management and coming up with the operating budget. So I think at this point, did you want to make a comment or? Okay, so I think at this point, I talked about the different funds, but we're gonna really kind of focus on the capital fund at this point. And it might be good just to set a little bit of the context. The community investment in our facilities is pretty significant. If you look, we have over 685,000 square feet that our community has invested in the community, and the replacement value, according to the study that was just done recently, is over $226 million. So that's a pretty significant investment in our community, and we, or I should say, I'm gonna say we, but previous administrations and previous boards have done an exceptional job of maintaining that investment, and we continue that tradition. And that's why, as you heard from your facility and finance committee members, not only do we look over the last couple years of what we've been doing to keep that investment sound, but we also project out 10 years, 2 years, and in the case of some of the financing that we're gonna be asking the board to give consideration to approving tonight, we looked at 6 years worth of history and certain funding resources to make sure that we didn't unduly obligate future boards, and that future boards were in a really good place to respond to any emerging needs or no needs that may come up, such as roofs and parking lots. So I sometimes have trouble reading my own PowerPoints this far away. So, but anyway, the 2022 study was done, and we identified a number of needs. And since that time, if we look at the different funding sources, we've really prioritized and come up with the most critical needs. Did want to just touch real quick on the financing options or the revenue sources. As I mentioned before, and as Mr. Bash has mentioned, districts really don't have a lot of flexibility in determining how much revenue they generate. We can go to our voters and we can ask them to approve a tech levy. We can go to our voters, we can ask them to approve bonding, or we can go to our voters and we can ask for operational revenue, which is our operating referendum. But other than that, everything is pretty well set in a formula under statute. And so these are the main categories. We have one formula called long-term facility maintenance. We call it LTFM, and we receive about $380 per pupil. A pupil unit is not the exact same thing as a student. There's some weighting factors, but it's right around 3,000 pupil units that we consider. Our operating capital is about $227 per pupil unit. And that's a little more interesting formula. Without going into a lot of detail, it looks at the weighted square footage and age of our building. So we report every addition that's made to a building, our oldest building was built in the 50s, and then as multiple additions were made to those buildings, those get weighted slightly different, but it averages out to about 227 per pupil. Our health and safety, IAQ, which is indoor air quality, is actually a state-determined amount, and we actually apply on an annual basis to the Commissioner of Education. We work in conjunction with our architects and engineers to determine best practices in that area to ensure that we're always looking at the safe operation of our facilities. And then finally, the tech levy, which is the one voter approved revenue source that we're going to talk about tonight. And I know Dr. Fletcher and others, I think Ms. Borchers, thanked our community for the recent approval of a 10-year term on the tech levy. That really has guided a lot of the work we're doing tonight and opened up opportunities for us to leverage a number of things. One thing that school districts really appreciate and need is a steady, reliable, predictable revenue source. And as you know, with the tech levy expiring last year, it kind of kept us from moving ahead with a high level of confidence. And now that we do have that 10-year term approved by our voters, and once again, it was approved by a really large percentage of our voters, that gives us the confidence to move ahead with the plan that we're presenting before you this evening. I do want to mention other resources too, although we're not going to talk about that tonight. But one of the really unique and exciting things about the Orono School District is you have your Orono Education Fund, as Mr. Matson had talked about. And I do know that the Orono Education Fund has actually pledged some resources to do some work at our theater. That'll be beyond the scope of what's talked about tonight, but I'm sure we'll have the opportunity to further emphasize how grateful the district is for that. So in looking at the facility maintenance and capital budgets timeline, I'm not going to go through this in great detail, but I do want to just point out that significant effort and a large lead time has been involved in this, going through a detailed facility study of every doorknob and door handle and flooring and building envelope, roofs, parking lots, etc. And then the board actually expended a fair amount of time studying this and getting up to speed on this, and then took it to committee, and we actually ran it by our building administrators as well. One of the ways that we're going to be able to achieve some of these top priorities is we are going to kind of pause some of our replacement cycles. We're going to pause any automobile or bus equipment replacement cycles. We seem to be in a good place for that for at least for the next several years, and our furniture replacement cycle too. So one of the good things is one of the good things about involving the entire board and other stakeholders is that we can really identify the top priorities. So this evening, we're going to ask the board to give consideration to approving some short-term borrowing. Basically, it'll be some bonding to achieve some of the objectives that Dr. Fletcher had talked about, and then also to accelerate our technology replacement. We do want to get our access points district-wide up to speed. Many of these programs, including the middle school, if we were to look at the resources that we receive, we would need to do that over 4 summers. And it's just not as efficient. The cost of the materials and the labor increases. And so at this point, it really makes a lot of sense to leverage some of the financing and fiscal tools. And Mr. Seeley will talk a little bit more about that. And then the other thing is, if the board does approve the sale of these short-term bonds and notes bonds and notes, then we'll need the board to actually approve the budgets too, the operating capital budget, the LTFM budget, and the tech levy budget, so we can go ahead and start ordering because of the high and longer lead times. So with that, I think that's the end of my opening remarks, and at this point, I would either open it up for questions, or if we want to move to the agenda item where we ask the board to approve the sale of some debt.
Do you have any more, is there another presentation related to the sale of the bonds, or?
Mr. Seeley will actually go through that, and you'll have a pre-sale report where he will go through
Okay.
that.
I had a question, and I'm sure that you guys have discussed this thoroughly, but just about our level of confidence with enrollment numbers, because enrollment is such a source of the funding and it determines what we need. There are a lot of new buildings going up around here all of a sudden, and I know we've done those studies in the past to see if enrollment is going to be steady, but it just strikes me as a lot of new construction. And are we taking that into consideration with our projections?
And that's a great question. What I can tell you at this point is we do have placeholders for a number of students at each grade level. We haven't been able to completely get a full-blown handle on the number of students who will move into the district and the number of students who will move out of the district by actually
It's a moving target.
relocating. Yeah, but that is something that we pay close attention to, and as Dr. Fleischer can probably attest, that enrollment report that we've been sharing with administration changes once a month, once every 2 weeks.
Weekly.
Yeah.
I think right now, when, at least the most recent demographic studies were only just a couple of years ago, and I know that COVID threw everything into, our challenge is that, is related to affordable housing, and particular with our elementary aged. So, we have enrollment has been, is most predictable in the secondary compared to elementary, and we have been, at least the demographic studies that I've been a part of, and the one most recently has been that we tend to have an older parent population compared to the younger. So if you look at elementary enrollment for next year, we have significant demand for kindergarten, and then grade levels are a little bit different. And you would think with some of the things going up, but part of them, one of them's a high-level apartment building, and they tend not to draw kids, families with kids. So those are the things we haven't seen that come to fruition in the elementary numbers as of yet, but we're still hopeful.
Thank you.
Any more questions directly for Mr. Westrom right now? All right, I think that was a great background. So now let's hear about some bond sales.
Yes,
How are we going to get the money for all this?
Yes, so actually I'm going to ask Mr. Seeley to come up and make remarks. Each of you should have a hard copy of a pre-sale report. And for board members who have been on the board in the past, this is not uncommon. We did this with the Discovery Center with our indoor air quality 2 years ago. And for new board members, I think you'll find that Ellers is very competent and skilled in helping us be as prudent and fiscally responsible as possible. So with that, Mr. Seeley, I'm going to ask you to come up and
Thank you.
thank you so much.
Well, thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. And we are going to talk a little bit about bonding here. So tonight you have a resolution in front of you, and it's an authorizing resolution. It authorizes the district to issue $5,610,000 in a combination of several different types of bonds and capital notes. When you get to the point of approving it, you want to do a roll call vote on it because it is a resolution. So you have a pre-sale report in front of you, and the first thing I'll mention is the amount predicted that we will be issuing is less than the authorization amount. So you'll see $5,610,000 being authorized. We're estimating that to be $5,315,000. The reason being is because we anticipate that the bid process will bring in premiums and you will generate some extra money towards the project. So you can do one of two things. You can issue the full authorization amount and have extra money, or you can just stick to your budget and reduce the par amount, and that's how this is set up. You have budgets that were put together, and the par amounts were adjusted down. Now, we will not know what the premium is until the actual sale date, so that'll be adjusted on sale day also. So that's the reason that there's a difference between the authorized amount and the estimated. Now, if we use the estimated amount with a premium as an authorizing amount, if you received a par bid, in other words, you didn't receive this premium, then you would be short on funds. So you have the authorizing amount, assuming a par bid, we will probably get a premium. Now,
Can we just for let's just explain to everybody what a premium is and why these bidders would bid, I mean, it's basic interest rates, but just if you would explain to
Yes.
everybody what the premium is.
Yes, if you're familiar with points on a mortgage, it's kind of similar to that, but essentially, the purchaser of your bond, called the underwriting firm, they want to have a higher interest rate. They will resell those bonds on the retail market. They're easier to sell if they get a higher interest rate. You, on the other hand, want the lowest interest rate, right? So what happens in order to make them marketable, if they're buying bonds and they have very low interest rates, it's very hard for them to sell their inventory. Investors are not overly interested in it. So what they do is they submit a bid with a higher than market interest rate. So you might be paying 5% where the market is 3%. But in return, they're going to calculate, they'll sell those for a different price, and they're going to generate a premium price they're going to sell them for. And that extra money that they're charging comes back to you up front. So it blends out to be market rate or market rates, but you have a higher coupon or interest rate that you're paying, but you get a bunch of money up front to make up for it. So that is what a premium is for. And the reason being is to make them marketable so they can sell those. Now, why would someone pay a higher price? Obviously, they want the higher coupon or interest rate, but why would they pay a higher price if it's offsetting it? Well, because the earnings is tax exempt, both state and federal. So they get that higher interest rate, but it's tax exempt also. So they get that, roughly 30% benefit, tax benefit on that. So they're willing to pay a higher price to get the higher interest rate, because then there's also the benefit of tax exemption.
Thank you.
That makes sense? Okay, good. All right, so back to the report. So we have 4 different authorizations or types of financing all rolled into one, and we are combining it all into a single issue for economies of scale. Okay, if you issued them all 4 separately, you'd be paying for upfront fees for all 4 bonds, and some of the maturities would be below kind of that efficiency threshold. By maturities, I mean annual principal payments. So it's all rolled into one. You have 4 purposes. Your capital notes portion will pay for technology equipment. Okay, the capital facility bond payment is improvements to the school buildings. Now your facility maintenance bond portions, you have 2 of them. One is for indoor air quality, and the other is for deferred maintenance. So you have 4 purposes, 4 authorizations all in this. We listed the authority statute 475 sections 123B 595, B61, and 123B62, if you want to look them up. So the term of this, again, a single issue with 4 purposes, and this will have separate payment schedules for internal use when you're working on your tax levies and so forth. As far as the purchaser of the bond is concerned, it's a single bond issue. So it's 8 years, 8 months is the term. Payments will be made February 1, the principal payments of 24 through 32, and then interest is payable every 6-month period. And then on February 1, 2030, we'll have a call date set. That is a date that will allow you to refinance or refund these bonds. Refund is the municipal bond term for refinancing. Refund the bonds should there be an opportunity to save money on it. And with we saw a period of tremendous savings on refunding over the past 10 years because rates were so low, and you go back 10 years earlier and they were higher. the whole market has changed, so whether there'll be an opportunity to refinance and save money is yet to be determined, but we do have that option in there. These will qualify as what we call bank qualification. If you issue $10 million or less in a given calendar year, there are some tax benefits to the investors. It's simply called bank qualification, and what it does is it broadens the market, brings more investors in who are eligible to have some tax savings on it. When you broaden the market, you tend to get a little lower interest rate. You'll also receive a little lower interest rate because part of the resolution is to enroll the district in the State Credit Enhancement Program. That's the program where the state of Minnesota will step in and make the payments should there be a default in the payment. What that does is it reduces the risk to the investors. Anytime you reduce the risk to investors, you lower your interest cost, okay? We'll do a competitive sale on this, so we'll advertise nationwide. We anticipate getting anywhere from 5 to 10 bids on it. That's what we've been seeing. So, most of the bidders come from the Midwest and the East Coast. We rarely see West Coast firms, maybe partly because of the time frame. I heard a time difference, I'm not sure. And then you have your continuous disclosure and arbitrage, which we work with administration on throughout the term of the bonds to make sure those requirements are fulfilled. On the investment, you can invest those proceeds. Anything that you earn on the investment of those goes right back towards the projects. Your bond attorney is Kennedy and Graven. Your paying agent, that's the agent that makes the payments. Actually, they will collect the money from you and make the payment, so if anything goes wrong, you don't have to work directly with this huge clearinghouse company out of New York called DTC. So your paying agent will take care of that for you. That's Bond Trust Services, and then the rating agency would be Moody's. So looking ahead at the calendar, tonight is the authorizing a resolution for it. Before we sell the bonds, we'll put together the official statement, go through a rating conference call, and then on May 8th, the morning of, we will take proposals or bids. We'll compile the results, bring them to the board that evening, and you will pass a resolution, an award resolution, which awards the sale of the bonds. And then the closing date is June 1, and the closing date is simply when the money is transferred to your account and it becomes available to start spending. So on page 6, you see the 4 different breakdowns and the total. Again, the bond amount is the estimated amount, assuming the premium. Like for example, that first column is $3,005,000, but you're authorizing 3.2. The deferred maintenance is $910,000 estimated, authorized $965. Capital facilities authorizes $445, and capital notes is $1 million. So again, that's where the premium comes in. You can see the premiums a couple lines down, and then also you're going to be using some funds on hand for the indoor air quality bond to make that first payment to capitalize that interest, so to speak. In other words, you're taking some funds on hand instead of levying for that $100,000. You're going to put it aside, and that is going to make that first interest payment instead of a levy. The next page is what we predict we will see when we sell these. This is the full issue, the full $5.3 million with the principal payments and then your interest payments of roughly $1 million. And we're estimating a true interest cost of 3.55% on it. And the we call it true interest cost because remember your interest rates or coupons that you're paying is going to be higher, but it's offset by the premium. So when we combine those, that's what the true interest cost would be. On page 8 is the facility maintenance bonds for the health and safety. I know these are really small because I can't even read them this close, but these numbers. But this is the portion of the bonds that would give you added levy authority. The rest of them, you're going to have a different source of revenue for. So what we did, we showed your existing building bonds, your existing commitments, debt commitments. These are all commitments that you have the additional levy authority for. So you have your building bonds, all facility abatement bonds, OPEB bonds, and then there's an annual adjustment, and then your next net levy, and we convert that to the tax rate. Okay, the one thing to note is we built in your roughly 21% increase in valuation, because when you calculate a tax rate, you take the levy divided by the property tax base. As that property tax base grows, assuming your levy stays constant, your tax rate will decrease. We only have a 3% future increase built in. You're probably likely to have much higher. That's a very conservative approach. But you can see where our tax rates are, and then
So let's just be clear to everybody, the fact, just as you said, that their property values are going up, we're not charging more, it just changes the rate. The denominator is increasing, but the numerator stays the same.
Yeah, but you are adding this
Right.
portion
But I mean,
to the tax.
it's just important that people don't think that we don't give this impression, oh, your property values are going up, and so your taxes are going up because your property values increased.
Right.
It's important that given this same spending, the rate declines if property values go up.
Yep. And if you notice, way to the right, you can see, well, you can see it better on the next page. You can see that we wanted to keep this add this on and keep the tax rate at or below the existing level. So adding this in is not increasing your tax rate, okay? So you can see, like in taxes payable 22 on the next page, it was 13.4 and 23, 12.3. That's before these bonds will become or go into effect. The orange squares is the tax rate portion of the proposed bonds. So it stays at about 12.3 for a couple years, then drops to 11.3, and then 9.7, and it's a short term, so then it's paid off at that point. So this is not leading to a tax rate increase. It's replacing bonds that are being paid off.
Can I just add to Mr.
Yes.
Seeley that page 9 is the one that's most helpful to me, but as we've talked about, the roofs needing to come due will be right at about that same time where you see the drop. So that's partly what we're trying to do, is to be really strategic, keep things in terms of the rate the same, but being able to fix what needs to be fixed, and keep our facilities strong.
This is the lumpy expenses and the smooth.
I like that
Revenue.
description, the lumpy. But,
That's per Jim.
yeah. Oh, Jim came up with that, huh? So, Dr. Flesher, you're right. When you look at this, when you're planning, especially if you're going out to vote, or if you're issuing bonds that have a tax impact that's board approved, you want to see, or you want to time it when you have a drop off. Because then instead of just adding to the higher rate, especially if you're asking for voter approval, you can offset it when you're paying off debt. So the page 10 is your deferred maintenance part of the facility maintenance bond. You already have a bond outstanding in there. So you see in the middle column the existing bonds, and then to the right the potential new bonds. You get about $1.2 million a year in your LTFM, or long-term facility maintenance revenue. That is the source. It's not an additional tax levy. That is the source that will make the payments on this portion. It's for deferred maintenance as opposed to health and safety. So you can see we show the estimate, way to the right, the estimated remaining annually that you can use for deferred maintenance. And then the last page is your capital notes and capital facility bonds. The thing I'd point out with that is your source to make the payments is your operating capital. Again, not a new tax. And you get about $730,000 annually, and you can see it'll drop for a handful of years down to about $440,000 remaining before it goes back up when these are paid off.
Excuse me, it's the braiding of funding.
And I think, real compliments to Ellers and Mr. Westerman and his staff for structuring these bonds so that, again, it keeps it flat. I mean, it's amazing how they can just move principal and interest payments around to keep this flat. And again, as Dr. Flesher talked about this braiding, but to make sure that while we use up some of the LTFM capacity, there's still plenty left there to deal with stuff that we don't know what's going to break next year. And that we still have money to be able to repair the stuff that's going to break next year and the year after that we need to have resources for. We're not spending it all now.
I think one of the things that I appreciated about the Facilities and Finance Committee from last year and then has carried forward is, okay, we know that we have these needs. How do we strategically plan for the needs of roof repairs, all of these kinds, an HVAC, a $3 million HVAC system at the middle school without having to further burden the community? How do we do that strategically so that in 10 years we're not asking for this, that each year we're just trying to keep our facilities strong?
Are you done?
I'm sorry, what?
Are you done?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so that was really good for a, 10 pages of a lot of numbers. That was a really good explanation. But questions now?
I just want to say I appreciate the explanation on the markup and how that helps go to market and get the bonds sold. That was a piece that I personally was trying to understand, but you did an excellent job of explaining it. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
So especially for the three of you that haven't heard this before, we got to ask, Todd and Sarah and I got to ask all the dumb questions last week, and we all had plenty. We all had plenty.
I think the overwhelming takeaway, and I think that you hear us talking about this, is that so much of our financing is very discrete and restricted, and this braiding of possibilities takes a lot of I'll just go with, yes, thank you, creativity and strategic thinking. And so it's a lot to take in, and so it's okay to ask questions because we certainly did. But at the same time, I remember clearly that you said in one of the former meetings that we've been doing a nice job updating you with at least the concepts, but now that you see the numbers, if you have questions, this is have at it.
I don't have a question, but I have a comment just to that regard. A thank you for the work that you do to get to this point, because it is really streamlined and you have kept us informed along the way. And for someone who's not a part of that committee, I really do feel informed. And this was an amazing presentation, both Jim and yourself. It's really helpful for us to understand all the nuances, because it's complex. So thank you for the work that you guys do to get it to this point, because it really makes it easier for the rest of us to be able to get on board and understand. So yeah, I mean, it's really great. It's really, really great. Really helpful.
All right, so we have a resolution that is prepared, that's a very legal, it's a very standard format that's required for issuing bonds for a school district in Minnesota. And it's item 9C on the agenda. It's listed as it's 39, 40, 41, and 42. So that's the resolution that we need to vote on and pass, and it's a roll call vote. So can I have someone make the motion, at least read the bold paragraph at the beginning?
Mr. Chair, I would like to move in support of the resolution stating the intention of the school board to issue general obligation capital notes, facilities maintenance and capital facilities bonds, Series 2023A, in the maximum aggregate principal amount of $5,610,000 and taking other actions with respect thereto.
Is there a second for that?
Second.
Thank you. All right, more discussion or questions? All right, we have to do a roll call vote for this, correct? So I don't think we've done too many of these yet since Todd and Wendy have been on the board. So we're going to start at that end, and we just kind of go one by one, and you just need to say aye, assuming that you're going to say yes for it. So, Mr. Mattson?
Aye.
Aye.
Sal?
Aye.
Aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Right. Resolution passes unanimously. Thank you very much. And we'll see you in a month with some really good news. People want these bonds.
Very good, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, may I go ahead?
You're back.
So thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. With the passage of your resolution, that means that the rest of the items that are in your packet are actually accurate, or as accurate as they can be. If you had not approved that, we would be going back to the drawing board. But I think this was a fiscally responsible and prudent way to create some efficiencies and really meet or exceed the expectations of our community, our students, and our staff. So the next items, and you'll have the opportunity to reapprove these in June, but once again, because of lead times, typically anything that needs to be manufactured or is a capital item that has a life that exceeds 1 year, typically we have to order these items pretty far in advance to make sure that we receive them in time for school to open or in time for the construction schedules that occur. So the first item before you is the 2023-2024 operating capital budget. And actually you have a hard copy of that before you. And yes, in the remarks, we made remarks on the funding formula associated with that. So at this point, what I'm asking the board to do is to simply approve the operating capital budget. And just a reminder that the operating capital budget was actually approved in December when the board approved the local property tax levy. A portion of it comes from state aid and a portion of it comes from local levy. So the total revenue in total is $728,399. And at this point, we're asking the board to approve total expenditures of $687,863. And you'll notice at the very bottom of that, $281,667 is for principal and interest payments that will be made on the bonds and notes and other items that were authorized today. So we do have a balanced budget in this area, and that remaining amount could be used for a contingency if necessary or to maintain some type of reserve. So the operating capital budget is before you. If you could give consideration to approving $728,399 in revenue and $687,863 in expenditures.
Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, thank you very much. And just to confirm, we will actually be voting on this again in June as part of the comprehensive 2023-2024 budget, correct?
That is correct.
Okay.
So this is a placeholder so that we can issue purchase orders and that you have actually authorized me to sign purchase orders that will commit the district after June 30th of this year.
Any other questions? All right, this one is not a roll call vote.
That is correct, just a
So,
approval.
all in favor of this, please say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Great, that one passes.
Great. The next item is very similar. This is the tech levy budget. And once again, the voters overwhelmingly approved the technology levy, and the board subsequently approved this in your December meeting where you approved the actual pay 2023 levy, which funds a portion of the 23-24 school year. In this case, the full amount is a levy, and the full levy was levied last December. So at this point, I'm asking the board to approve $1,253,030 in capital projects revenue, technology levy. And then the total expenditures are $1,228,604. And the ending fund balance will actually increase from $0 to $24,426. And once again, the recommendation would be that we would bring this to the board again in June, and that the remaining amount would be a contingency or would allow us to build a slight reserve in this account. So with that, the action is before you for approval and
So we need
consideration.
a resolution for the tech levy budget for 2023, 2024.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All right, any questions on this one? All right, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, that one passes. Now, the next two are roll call votes, correct?
Yep, the next two
Okay.
are roll call votes. The next one is a long-term facilities revenue for Orono School District number 278. And then, as Dr. Fletcher had mentioned, we're a member of Intermediate District 287. And so we also will need to approve the long-term facilities revenue for Intermediate School District number 287. But at this point, I just want to indicate that until we actually sell the bonds, we won't have real hard and fast numbers. So what I'm asking the board to do is to approve the long-term facility revenue, and that includes the 2-year and 10-year plan that you basically authorized the board or the administration and myself to implement in your March 13th meeting. So I guess that are the remarks, those are as far as the remarks that I can make at this point. And once again, we will take this to the board again in June after we've had the sale of bonds, and you'll have precise numbers. But at this point,
So we're gonna get to vote on this 3 times in March,
To avoid it.
April, and June. We better be really good at voting on this one, okay?
and the dollar amounts have only changed slightly, so, but
So
we
this
get
is
better
the
information.
approximately the million,
Yep, approximately 1,200,000 minus any commitments that have already been made for principal and interest payments.
all right, can I have a recommendation, or excuse me, a motion that we approve again the district's updated 10-year LTFM plan for fiscal year 2024 to 2033?
So moved.
Second.
All right, this one we need a roll call vote for, so Mr. Madsen, if you'd go first.
Aye.
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 Aye,
Aye.
great, that was approved.
And the last item would be the roll call vote for intermediate district school, or 287. And I apologize, I don't have my agenda sheet in front of me, but the dollar amount is listed in your agenda sheet. I'm wondering if one of you may.
$26,158.11.
Right, okay, so that's a pro rata portion of the member districts that are involved in 287. That number is really comparable to the previous years. And once again, Intermediate District 287 has a board and a finance and facility committee. And then they also have member district finance directors. And we have seen that and studied that, similar to what the Orono School District's Finance and Facility Committee has done for Orono's LTFM plan. So with a high level of confidence, I'm making that recommendation to the board for approval.
So I have a motion to approve the District 287 2024 budget of $26,158.11.
Do we have to, Mr. Chair, do we have to read the resolution on this one? I'm wondering.
Oh, I'm sorry.
For-
we-
no,
we
it's
do have
okay.
We have a resolution. I'm sorry, I forgot that.
It
Yeah.
is a resolution.
Let's do that. Can
Yeah.
somebody read the resolution, the bold part in the front? I'm sorry, thank you. Todd, your
Resolution,
microphone's on. You look like you're ready to go.
Wendy,
Oh, Wendy's ready then, okay.
no, I don't have my glasses, so.
Motion to approve the resolution for the Intermediate School District number 287's long-term facility maintenance program budget and authorizing the inclusion of a proportionate share of those projects in the district's application for long-term facility maintenance revenue.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Wendy. All right. We do need a roll call for this one. So Todd?
Aye.
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 Great, that one passes too. You did a great job tonight, Mr. Westerman.
Thank you, Jim.
All these
Terrific.
unanimous votes.
Well, and once again, I just want to thank the board, the entire board, because I think the community can have a high level of confidence that you are continuing with your commitment to maintain the prudent fiscal management of the district, not only its operations, but also the significant investment that's been made by the community over many decades. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Some exciting times ahead. This is good that we're making progress on this. Is there any other new business that we need to address tonight? All right, seeing that there's none of that, just a reminder, in your packet, there was the enrollment for the month of April. And our next regular board meeting is scheduled for Monday, April 24th at 7 p.m. here in the district office. We will be having our first, to try it out, coffee and conversations prior to that. Where we'll have several board members and administrators here or someplace near here prior to the board meeting for some opportunity for the community for informal conversations with us. And so we're looking forward to trying that out in 2 weeks. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.